This is where we are. With President Trump possibly attempting to deflect attention away from his roundly criticized response to Charlottesville by firing the man who gave name and oxygen to a new face of fascism, racism, anti-Semitism, hate, the alt-right. Let's bring in our panel now. CNN political analyst April Ryan, White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks, political commentator, or political contributor, I should say, Michael Nutter, the former Democratic mayor of Philadelphia, political commentator Matt Lewis, senior columnist for the Daily Beast, syndicated talk radio host John Fredericks, former co-chair for the Trump campaign in Virginia, and Robert Kuttner. He's the co-founder and co-editor of the American Prospect magazine, and he joins us via Skype. Good evening. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, a fascinating hour ahead. April, going through those cards in the week, I mean, what a week it has been. It has been exhausted. A lot has transpired.
What a week.
You're at the White House every day. Bannon is out, but there's deep wounds that are far from being healed right now.
Yeah.
And this is from everything that's unfolded in Charlotte.
Yeah. They're deep wounds, and I'm going to start with this, Don. I've been watching the coverage all day.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. But I've been watching the coverage all day, and you know, with the Bannon firing, Bannon is spinning this, and those who are in the Bannon camp are spinning this like it's a great thing. He's got his hands on the weapons, but he was fired. We have to remember, he was fired. And when you're fired and when you leave the White House, you don't have the power you once wielded. Well, typically you don't. We'll see what happens. But he is not in that inner circle. We know that there was a negative back and forth between Bannon and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the President of the United States. We also know that there was a concern about Bannon being one of the problems of leaking. So Bannon and his supporters are spinning this like it is a win. But this is not a win. But typically, when you leave the White House, you don't have I guess the power, the Washington power that you once wielded. And also, there is a concern, and they're spinning this because they don't want that base, that Bannon base, the people who were in Charlottesville, some of the other people around the country who support that kind of thing, to break away from the president. They're trying to make it look good, but it's not. Yeah. And we will see what happens in the next coming weeks, days, what have you.
Yeah, Michael, I said that it was possibly to change the narrative. I mean, but Bannon brought the alt-right into the West Wing. Does his ouster address any of the questions of racism or competence from this president?
No, Don. I mean, look, Donald Trump is, what, 70, 71 years old. I was thinking about this the other day. He was 22 at the height of the civil rights movement. Apparently that passed him by, and he has no understanding, empathy, anything. He has no moral center. But, you know, Steve Bannon, I mean, I don't know how much influence Steve Bannon had on Donald Trump, but he should have sense enough of his own to not do some of the things that he has been speaking directly from his heart. That is very, very clear. So Donald Trump himself is spiraling downward in a vortex of chaos and confusion. And unless he changes, he can't fire his way out of the problems that he's having and that this White House and this entire administration is being consumed by, unless he changes. Yeah. It allows General Kelly to manage up and down, deal with the staff, but a principal. And I understand this.
Including
a principal has to be managed also. Yeah. Primarily by the chief of staff and other people around him or her.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Someone has to manage this president, because clearly, if you look at Matt,
he doesn't want to be managed.
If you looked at the pictures, and this is not everyone, by the way, who has come and gone at the White House or in the administration, Matt. When you look at these pictures, this is a higher number than most modern administrations, Matt Lewis, of people who
David Gergen talked about this earlier. I mean, Matt, this is a wholesale turnover of your top people in the first 7 months. This never happens.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, Don. Look, I mean, you showed it to us, right? Don't tell us, show it. I mean, the pictures, they were right there. And earlier today, Brooke Baldwin didn't just talk about the staffers, the turnover, but also the turmoil. You've had the whole Russia stuff, you know. You've had Donald Trump attacking Republicans like Mitch McConnell, Jeff Flake, his own Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. You've had Donald Trump fail to pass any legislation, any meaningful legislation, including health care reform. That is the state of affairs today. This administration, it's been 6 months now, enough time to get your footing, is a disaster. And I think it's time for Republicans to admit that. And, you know, you showed those videos earlier. I think you're starting to see that, some senators walking away.
John, what do you think? Remember, I've got a big brain or a good mind or a good brain. I hired the best people, and then all of these people are gone. What does that say? What do you think of this, John?
Well, I guess if he's hiring the best people, he should probably hire some of us, right, Don? Let's start there. But look, it's the game on. What happened here today, it's game on, and that's about as frank as I can be. You know, the detractors inside the West Wing that are celebrating tonight because they were part of Steve Bannon's ouster. You know, my mom taught me an old saying a long time ago: be very careful what you wish for, it might come true. Steve Bannon's ouster today is a punch in the stomach to Trump loyalists and Trump supporters and this movement that really believe the president is onto something, and he's trying to remake
John,
and transform the
something.
Republican Party into something that they've not accomplished.
Okay, I want to help you make your point. Let me help you make your point, because this was Bannon told the Weekly Standard. He said the Trump presidency that we fought for and won is over. We still have a huge movement, and we will make something of this Trump presidency. But that presidency is over. It'll be something else, and there will be all kinds of fights, and there will be good days and bad days. But that presidency is over. You say this revolution has been hijacked, right? And you said it's a punch in the gut. Go on.
Well, look, it has been hijacked by the establishment and the class of Republican-based donors that all they care about is getting money and their globalist agenda, and that's basically it. Now, the only thing that is over with this presidency is Steve Bannon is no longer in that White House. I'm not sure where Steve was headed with that. I'm sure there's a degree of frustration he has. But the Trump base, Don, and April, they're not going to sit idly by and see their movement and their extension of the victory they had.
But Donald Trump's the president.
That's what I was going to say, John. Can I ask you this? Hold on, Matt. Hold on, John. Matt, John, doesn't the buck stop with the president? You're not placing any responsibility, no onus, no blame on the man who is sitting in the Oval Office. This is all other people hijacking. It's the media. It's everyone around him. There's no blame on this president?
It's all him.
The president now has to take the reins and take control and do what he did in the campaign and get his things
You're not answering my
done.
question, John.
But
the president takes no responsibility in this.
Of no responsibility.
You know what? People like Steve Bannon and Ann Coulter, let's say, thrust Donald Trump on us. They pushed Donald Trump on the conservative movement and the Republican Party, and they won. But the guarantee they gave the voters was, this is a guy who believes in nationalism. This is a guy who believes in populism. This is a guy who's a winner. You're telling me that after 6 months he's allowed his administration to be hijacked? What kind of a winner?
It's actually 7 months. It's actually 7 months.
We've got 8 months.
Okay.
We got 7 months into
it took 8
an
months
administration.
to hijack it. Okay.
Now, what I didn't say was hijacked. Now, don't put words in my mouth. I said
you did say that.
They're not going to allow it. They're not going to allow it to be hijacked. And a lot of the original Trump loyalists have been tossed out of there. So the president's got to figure this out. He's got 3 key advisors now, along with his children, that still believe in the core principles that got him in there. And that's
his children are Democrats,
Miller, Kellyanne, and Hope Hicks. That's it.
He has no
centrist
principles.
Republicans.
He has no principles.
He is driving an agenda, but he's now. Look, he's now surrounded.
What is the agenda? The agenda has been hijacked by distractions. There is no agenda. The hijacking of the agenda from the president's own distractions, from wiretapping to confetti to the possibility of a tape between him and Comey, all of this other stuff. The president, and then going back and forth just within the last week on the issue of Charlottesville. The president is hijacking his own agenda, and his own party is now publicly coming out talking about 2020 and the possibilities that they may not want him on the ticket.
There have been a lot of people who have come and gone. A lot of people have come and gone in this White House. The one constant, this is the one constant in the White House, right here, is the President of the United States. Is Donald Trump. Yeah. So I don't understand how it's been hijacked by everyone. Listen, I just say this show faltered and I was no longer in the air. I could sit here and blame everybody, but I'm the leader of this show. I would say I could have done a better job. I didn't do a good enough job. The audience wasn't interested in me. I wouldn't blame it on everybody else. Why are you blaming it on everybody else? I don't understand that. Listen, I got to get Robert.
Don, we're not blaming it.
Hold on, John.
The president.
Hold on, John. What did everybody else hear? What did you hear, Michael? Did you hear him blaming it on everybody else but the president?
It's been captured.
Okay, stand by.
They're on an island.
Matt, what did you hear?
He's shot himself in the foot so many times, it's impossible to understand he can still walk.
Matt, what did you hear?
I think that whether it's guests or Steve Bannon or
what did you hear John say though?
I thought, maybe I misheard, I thought that it was hijacked, that the campaign had been hijacked.
In April, you said as much. Robert, what did you hear?
What did I hear?
Did you hear?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Did you hear him? Because we all thought he said that it had been hijacked and there was Donald Trump bore no responsibility for what's happened in his own administration.
The establishment.
Well, are we talking about Bannon?
No, we're talking about John, because I thought that maybe we have been wrong, and I don't want to beat up on John.
You're not beating up on me.
I want to talk about Bannon. Can I talk about Bannon?
Absolutely, because you apparently this furor over Bannon is this interview with you. Do you feel partly to blame here?
I don't know whether it's blame or credit. I mean, I think he was in the process of doing himself in. And I was fortunate enough to get the phone call that turned out to be the straw that broke the camel's back. But my experience of that phone call was that this was a guy much too full of himself, who was kind of out of control, who knew that he was probably going down. And if he was going to go down in flames, he wanted to go down with all guns blazing, and didn't have much loyalty to his president. And I think ultimately he got fired because if you're Donald Trump, the one thing you cannot stand is being upstaged by staff. And Bannon, first of all, was getting too much attention. Secondly, was disloyal to his president. And I think the irony here is that Bannon was the architect, as you said, John, of this neo-fascist, white supremacist garbage. And so my worry is that with Bannon out of the White House, he is more liberated to be more effective back at Breitbart and to be a kind of a kitchen cabinet advisor to Trump under, without any scrutiny from General Kelly or the rest of the staff. And he can continue to play this role of advising Trump. So I think Trump's at a crossroads. He's got to back off this white supremacy garbage, or as recent events suggest, he may double down on it with Breitbart pressuring him to do more of it.
John, why are you shaking your head? I want John to get in because I don't want to think we're beating up. I want to hear from him.
Why do every conversation we have, we now have to bring in the alt-white, white supremacist? This is an absurd statement that you just made. These people have nothing to do with Trump, the movement, or anything else. The people that came to Charlottesville a week ago were crackpots and crazies and lunatics that the president disavowed.
David Duke literally said thank you and told the president
you want to keep bringing it up over and over and over, April, because that is all you have. The Democrats have no agenda.
Now you're targeting me.
So
now you're targeting me. Did David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK, it's not ridiculous. Excuse me?
Let me say this. They're crazy.
Let me say this.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay,
then
well
he
they're
is
nuts.
too.
But David Duke did say, Mr. President, you better watch what you say because we are who supported you. Now, do you negate that? Do you say that didn't happen? David Duke, who was a high leader in the KKK, said that. That is fact. That's not myth. It's not conjecture. He said that. And then he supported him with that waffling statement, the last statement that the president made about both sides. So you cannot say that I'm creating this. I am only reporting fact, and I'm reporting what is given to us by these leaders around this country. So you need to understand that I'm not having an agenda or trying to put words in anyone's mouth. You can run back the tape and see, John.
April, who the
It is
hell
what it
cares
is.
what David Duke says? Nobody cares what this guy says. He's got
Apparently
a
Donald
tiny
Trump
itty-bitty
does.
following.
He's got
and
a lot of
crazy
people.
man.
The people
He
who were in
doesn't care what he
Charlottesville
says
care.
either.
There was a,
You know,
a
April,
woman died,
they're
John.
nuts,
John, I'm not going to argue
There's
with you.
crazy
I'm not going to
people on
argue with
both
you.
sides.
All right,
They
guys.
are nuts, and I'm glad
All
we
right,
agree
guys,
nuts, but I'm
one
not
at a
going to
time,
argue
one
with
at a
you.
time.
I'm
Robert,
not going to argue with
Robert,
you.
I want to bring you back
I'm
into
not gonna
this
argue with
conversation
you.
because I think your reporting was so important. Bannon contradicted the president on North Korea. Did you want to add anything to what they were saying before we move on and talk about North Korea?
No, I mean, I just think it's pointless to try and deny that Trump has been legitimatizing these fringe people, giving aid and comfort to them, and that they were a big part of his base. I think the really complicated thing about Bannon is that Bannon has a whole economic nationalist strategy that is part of his larger strategy, and it's one part economic nationalism, but it's one part racism. And he, in a weird way, thought that he could create a kind of a left-right political coalition by reaching out to me, reaching out to other people who are more on the liberal side, who've been critical of our China policy. But, you know, the idea of Trump going into a meeting of the National Security Council and saying, hey, guess what, everybody, I got Bob Kuttner supporting me on China, is delusional. And what was just bizarre about this conversation was, here's a guy, if you believe the New York Times story, who already had tendered his resignation under pressure 2 weeks ago, and he's living in a kind of a fantasy land where he thinks he's still making policy, and he's inviting me to the White House after Labor Day. So you wonder what planet these people are living on. And I guess the question is whether Trump, at this crossroads, is going to distance himself from the really creepy neo-Nazi far right, or whether he's going to double down on it, as he did Tuesday, as he may do in this rally at Phoenix, if it happens, if he pardons Joe Arpaio. And he needs Bannon in a weird way if he sticks to this course, because Bannon was the architect of it.
Yeah. Hey, Mayor Nutter, I want to put something else up more from Bannon from the Weekly Standard. He says, I feel jacked up. Now I'm free. I've got my hands back on my weapons. Someone said it's Bannon the barbarian. I am definitely going to crush the opposition. There is no doubt. I built a bleeping machine at Breitbart, and now I'm about to go back knowing what I know, and we're about to rev that machine up, and rev it up we will do. Knowing what I know, I mean, what do you make? It's
Well, first of all, it sounds like a guy who's maybe holding on to himself, but he really does sound a little bit like the nutcase over in North Korea. I mean, I don't know this man, read the news accounts, but he sounds like he's coming unhinged or off the rails, much like his former now boss, Donald Trump. But the other thing I want to mention to you, Don, is from all accounts, virtually everyone who has left the White House, maybe with the exception of Jim Comey, Donald Trump still stays in touch with these folks. So I think it was April that mentioned, in the White House, out of the White House, he still talks to these people. This stuff, this white supremacy, neo-Nazi, all of that, I believe now we've seen the real Donald Trump on Tuesday. That is in his heart and soul. He is a vacuous vessel that people pour stuff into, and he then amplifies it out to the public. He has no center and goes with whatever the last person who talked to him about and then says it. And so we don't ever know what he's going to do. He created his own problems. He continues to create his own problems and then wants to whine about his agenda, which no one on this panel, at least, maybe except for the one gentleman, no one else knows what that agenda is, and then dumps on everyone who could possibly help him with his agenda. that no one knows about.
Matt, I want you to take a look at this. I hope you have a monitor there. This is a photo of President Trump on the phone with Putin. This is from January. Everyone in that photo, Priebus, Bannon, Spicer, Flynn, all gone aside from the president and the vice president. And a source says that the chief of staff, Kelly, is not done yet.
Yeah, watch out, Sub Gorka, right?
Yeah.
No, it's that picture is telling me that's a big important moment, and they're all gone, and except for Mike Pence and the president himself. And look, I think it's a valid point. Just because, though you have to say, just because Steve Bannon is gone doesn't mean that he won't.
That he's gone.
Still be talking, right? Roger Stone. Corey
Right.
Lewandowski,
Yeah,
these
exactly.
people still talk to the president.
Yeah.
I would say this, I think we may be
Scaramucci.
magnifying the power of Breitbart.com a little bit. I know they're important, I know they're well
Yeah, this gives them some nice publicity.
Right, you know
Yeah.
how they, look, a lot of people out there do read them, but do you know how they really have influence? It's when the mainstream media shows them. Like,
Right.
if on Monday, Breitbart writes something attacking Javanka or Cohn or something, and then the cable news networks put them out there,
Yeah.
that will magnify. I think that's where they really have the power.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all. John, you take it, buddy. Thank you for coming on. We'll see you. We'll
Always a
see you
pleasure.
next
Thanks for
time.
having me.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Nice.
All right. Justin.